Welcome to another episode of AI Lyceum. We're here today with James Bentley. James Bentley is an AI strategy director at Awin. He's had 2 decades in digital advertising and he's quite popular on LinkedIn, actually. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit more, James?
Yeah, sure, Samraj. Thank you very much for that. Firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to speak tonight. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and great to connect with you as well, and great to learn about what you're doing with the AI Lyceum and what you're working towards here as well. And yeah, very pleased that you reached out to me. Very pleased that we've got the opportunity to talk about virtual agent economies. A little bit about me. So, as you said, I've worked in digital advertising for about 2 decades now. So I've seen pretty much the rise and the growth of e-commerce and the rise of digital advertising in relation to that as well. So the growth of Google search, many other forms of advertising, social, the mobile revolution as well. So I've seen a fair amount, and I've lived through a lot of it as well. Over that time, I've worked across a number of organizations. Right now I work for Awin, and Awin is an affiliate partnerships platform. We work with 40,000 brands, hundreds of thousands of media owners, and we service the platform that connects them and enables brands to work with media owners to promote products and sell those products and to pay commissions back on. That's what Awin does. And I work on AI strategy there. So I work on the adoption of AI, work on feature identification, work with our engineering teams. I'm embedded with them. I also work on commercial business planning, work on governance, compliance. I do all of that. And I've been in my role for about 2 years. In my role prior to working at Awin, I worked for Adobe for about 5-6 years. And I worked on some of their AI and machine learning programmatic advertising optimization technology, which was AI powered, ML powered. And I had the opportunity to work on that from 2012 to 2019. And literally, their technology was like space age to me back then, and it was still amazing now, the way in which it could predict like ad forecasting and just do amazing things with these very, very sophisticated ML algorithms. It was really amazing. And I kind of look back on that time as I didn't really understand or realize what I was working with back then. And it was just kind of the foundation or the beginning of what we then have come to see since ChatGPT has started to take over the world from 2022, late 2022. So yeah, so I've had a bit of background in the prior ML side of things, but then also since GenAI has come up, I've been really, really deep into GenAI and basically oriented my whole professional career and my life around the transformation that AI is driving in the world right now. That was a long answer to your short intro question.
Yeah, it's not a problem. I mean, it's good to get an extensive summary, and I think your experience in Adobe is quite relevant actually, because Adobe's a business that's been around for a long time, working on AI and ML in 2012 to 2019 is quite ahead of the curve. I started working on marketing science algorithms in 2019 onwards, so a lot further on than you did, but I entered the industry in 2015, so it would have been good if we met earlier. But the whole point of today's conversation, right, is around virtual agent economies based on a paper by Google DeepMind. And you put on LinkedIn a nice little snippet, and it's highlighted in yellow. I've got it here. It says, the first line says, the rapid adoption of autonomous AI agents is giving rise to a new economic layer where agents transact and coordinate at scales and speeds beyond direct human oversight. I think that that's the best summary of what we want to talk about today, because in the advertising ecosystem, there's an online marketplace, right, where we have buyers and sellers and people to advertise to, or spaces or inventory to advertise within. And the algorithms that we both worked on are helping people to get the right ads in the right places, but also both sides to make a good outcome from that transaction. And it's kind of similar to the stock exchange. And these virtual agent economies is a paper that summarizes the future of the world, or the economies of agents online acting like, virtual versions of a human being doing things for us, but in a new economic system using things like tokens and decentralized IDs. So that's the focus of today. But before we go into that, I want to ask you, how is the rise of ChatGPT and Google, etc., with AI mode changing the referral marketing scheme? Because it's more of a kind of walled garden approach now, right? You have to kind of hack the system, so to speak.
Yeah, so I think it's changing it's introducing changes to digital advertising overall, right? And the most fundamental layer for which that's happening is in search. So obviously, more people are using ChatGPT for discovery. ChatGPT recently published a report with the National Bureau of Economic Research. I think it's like how people use ChatGPT, and they talk about the crazy growth in ChatGPT's usage, and they show you all the breakdowns of how people use it and what they do use it for. And they identify like core activities of people seeking out information, often looking for answers and information, and they talk about like the crazy growth in messages that have occurred year on year. So it's like nearly a 6x increase in daily messages going through ChatGPT. And this is combined with the growth of like Google's AI overviews as well. It's changing advertising. There are increased challenges to content creators because AI is summarizing information. And although when ChatGPT or Google summarizes information, they will provide a citation to something. It's a question as to whether people click through and go and read that citation. So that's fundamentally changing the mechanisms upon which the internet or the commercial internet has worked for a while, and that's something which everyone is reconciling with. It's at its early stages now, but it's something that everyone is having to think about in advertising, which display advertising, search advertising. Even Google itself has to think very, very carefully around rolling out these new kind of user experiences, because their whole business is basically funded, or a lot of it is funded by Google ads, search ads, and changing that experience is also very risky and takes a lot of consideration there as well. So overall, advertising is being presented by these changes. It's still early. Like if you look at the data, the most core data that reflects this, if you look at the National Bureau of Economic Research paper, about 2.4% of ChatGPT messages relate to product searches. It's small right now, like it's small. And that doesn't take into account all the other kind of messages or searches that go in there. But I think ChatGPT is at 2.6 billion messages a day compared to Google's 16 billion or so searches a day. So this is an order of magnitude smaller, but the potential for this to grow and to grow quickly it is already there. So yeah, it's raising that interesting question, and I think that's where this paper, Virtual Agent Economies, is particularly interesting, because what we're also seeing is a new internet where more and more of the content will have been written by AI, and also quite a lot of consumption of that content, if not the majority of it, will be consumed by agents as well. And then when agents are consuming content, that means that they're not looking at display ad impressions. They're not looking at the adverts on the page when they're doing that. They're there to get the information. And so this Virtual Agent Economies paper kind of gives us like a preview into what this ecosystem might look like and how this might be designed, and all of the considerations that need to be factored in to enable a new form of transaction where information can be exchanged between agents or entities, and value can be attributed to that, and the right incentives and rewards can be distributed in relation to that as well.
Yeah, I find it interesting about the types of searches that people use in ChatGPT. A lot of it's for life advice and whatnot. But you mentioned the small percentage of 2.6%. If you look at, let's say, billions of searches, 2.6 is actually quite a big number. So as an absolute number is quite big. And I'd like to look at the before and after. So when it was in 2022 to now, what's the X of increase? So is it 100%, 200%? And that's what I think we should look at, the acceleration factor between before and now, and where do we predict it to be in, let's say, 5 years. And the amazing thing is that people are using these tools for pretty much everything now, and so they've got a lot of rich data about consumers, uh, and the whole advertising ecosystem is built on a lot of it's built on the online open marketplace, and the open marketplace is going to change because a lot of consumers are going direct to these platforms, either Amazon search or TikTok, or they go to ChatGPT or Google AI mode. But it used to be that people go to loads of different websites, explore, and now it's changing. So What are the most significant changes you see coming, and how do advertisers prepare for it?
Well, the changes for advertisers. Well, I'm going to skip back a little bit on it. I'm going to talk about something a little bit different here. But it's related. What I find interesting about this is this year. I mean, the pace at which AI has changed and the dynamics of how AI operates and what it does has changed massively over the past year. You get some people talk about, oh, AI is plateauing. And it's like, no, actually, if you think about what is actually happening within these systems, there's been a huge step change. When ChatGPT launched, you couldn't even upload a PDF to it. People forget that. You could barely put 4 A4 pages of information into the context, maybe 5, 6. Not much, right? That's changed now. This is like hundreds of thousands of tokens that you can now put into tokens worth of information you can put in. The most important change really is up until earlier this year, when you accessed an AI model, it was working off its pre-trained data set. It was working off just the knowledge that it had been given in its pre-training, which was cut off at a particular time. Like, I think the first ChatGPT would have been cut off, like GPT-4 would have been cut off some point in like 2023, maybe 2022, whatever. It was cut off. It didn't know anything about the world after that point in time. And that was obviously they were amazing, but it was still kind of like a weird, lousy user experience in that it didn't know who the current president was or other kind of things, right? And the big change that's happened since then is that since ChatGPT has come and all these other models have come, is the training data, the pre-training data that comes from the internet has become more challenged because there's more synthetic AI created content in there, which means it's harder to train AI models on that. And that is now being replaced by what I call the return of search. Or I say that generative AI is the continuation of search by other means. Because all the AI models now, to provide an incredible experience to people, have to be powered with real-time search. If you want to find a product, there's no use finding out how much that product was back in 2022 if you're in 2025. You need to know what it is today. And so this is driving a movement into real-time enabled search. ChatGPT has real-time search, Perplexity, and all of them need this real-time search, and they need to be able to harvest that in and to deliver it to the agents, to deliver to the user. And I think what that is doing, though, is that is creating a new value economy around information, because OpenAI can't create that information themselves. They're reliant on third parties to provide that. And who are those third parties? They're the content creators. They're the brands themselves. They're the product inventories. They're all kinds of things that are out there. And I think that's the interesting thing here that kind of comes back into virtual agent economies, is that previously all of that content, or up to today, all that content has been ad funded. Like it's been subsidized by advertising, a lot of it. Brands have advertised on that and they have subsidized the content that exists there. But now, because content owners are being disintermediated, that's kind of disrupting that mechanism there. But what you also have on the other side of it is the AI providers need the information because they need it for their user experience. So what it's creating is this dynamic of necessity where information is needed, the old models are being challenged, and nobody's quite figured this out yet. And what does this mean for brands? Coming back to your point as well. Well, for brands, it means that if you're running display ad campaigns in a few years' time, they might be challenged because you've been used to putting those in front of human eyeballs. But actually, a lot of those eyeballs may not be eyeballs. They may be agents going and surfacing and interacting with information. And so what that's also driving is an interest and a real necessity to understand, how do the frontier model providers surface information from real-time search, and how do they deliver that to users, and how, as a brand, do you operate that to work to your greatest benefit? And that is like and that goes for brands, but that goes for pretty much everyone in the world right now who has a stake in a presence in the internet, I think.
That's a really interesting point around there's a dynamic between the brands and these models, but how does that impact the brands? Because the brands have probably less control now around, let's say I search in a particular advertising platform, a particular LLM, and I'm searching for a black T-shirt. How does a brand get their answer in the answer engine? Because now it's difficult to understand exactly how do you get your brand in there, especially as a first answer. So, what sort of ways do you think that that could happen?
So there are already. I've studied this and I've worked on this and I've experimented into it. And actually, it's not too dissimilar from SEO right now. So the principles that you would use for SEO to have your information appear in a frontier model provider, those are the principles that Google advise for AI overviews. And I think ChatGPT runs, as I understand it, they run a version of Bing Search under the hood to go and pull information. Now, the dynamics of that are that effectively it's retrieving information the same way like that a historical search would. But then what you then have is an AI layer on top of that, which processes the information that comes back. So there's an additional processing step, just like if I told you to go and look on Google for black T-shirts, and you went and you looked at the top 10 pages there, and you went through each one, you looked at and you processed all that information, and then you hierarchically ordered those to say, I think this is the best source, and I think based on looking at all of these, this is the best thing to buy. That's what the model is doing in the middle there. And the interesting dynamic of that is actually a little bit, it's not too dissimilar from what's been happening with Google Ads over recent years. Google Ads has been very much personalized around audiences and audience segments and like what audience dimensions people might be layering on top, or Google might be layering on top to surface things about. But the LLM will operate slightly differently to that. But it comes down to understanding what signals the LLM looks for in content to then prioritize the hierarchical organizing and the prioritization of that information. And there's information out there that kind of guides that. It's not, again, as I say, it's not too dissimilar from SEO. But the other dynamic that's going to come into this, which doesn't exist fully yet, or maybe is nascent, is the incredible wealth of user interaction with the model. The memory functionality which is being implemented in ChatGPT or Anthropic, and how that is going to also influence the reorganization and the prioritization of information sent back to the user. And really, OpenAI, ChatGPT, it is going to be the most powerful and sophisticated personalization engine that we've ever seen. But that also in itself is going to raise a bunch of considerations, just like Google has had a bunch of considerations around, algorithmic updates to SEO ranking, SEO engine, not its answer rankings. Same thing with ChatGPT. They're going to have to think very, very carefully about how they protect the user experience as the AI delivers that to the user. So you can figure some of it out. There's also going to be a bunch of it which is going to be a bit of a black box and deeply personalized. But then inevitably, advertising mechanisms will be implemented in the major chat assistants. Perplexity is I believe they've launched some ad offerings, or they've been talking about like message level representation for brands, stuff like that. So the opportunity to bid per message. And I think these mechanisms might possibly also emerge as well in the larger platforms as well. You can also there are also ChatGPT does also, if you look at if you go into the technical stuff, they also do talk about partnering with some product information aggregators as well. Like they say that somewhere on their sites. So they're already starting to kind of look at some of that as well. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No problem. I'm interested in what I call the referral marketing mix within these LLMs. So whenever you search for something, it has a chain of thought, right? And it says, I'm scanning these sites, and they have agent mode now, which I tried out. And I find agent mode really fascinating because I can override it to log into a site and do the capture form, for example. So it's really, really sophisticated. And it's bridging the gap between an agent and a human being now. So I can click inside these sites when it's searching and it tells me a full chain of thought analysis, which I think brands should do more of, is look at the chain of thought analysis, make like a world view or an understanding of those particular searches, and then reverse engineer, figure out content strategies. You mentioned a point about memory, which I find really fascinating as well, because for the first time ever, there's a memory about every single thing a person does. So before it used to be based on cookies, right? You have a login ID as well, but if you're logged out, it won't have anything stored. But with these platforms, everyone's logged in all the time to use these platforms and to use their Plus account or Pro account, for example. So every single thing you've ever asked is reverse engineering your mind, which brings me on to the point of: do you think we'll have brand lift studies in these platforms? Because I feel like if people are already asking questions, and it can be for the first time ever, there'll be brand lift studies done without having ads needed. So they can effectively make a brand lift study, and we're paying on a quarterly basis or something for an understanding of what consumers are actually thinking about brands before advertising. Then when advertising comes in, then they see a pre and a post brand lift study, rather than just in a campaign level, which is probably 4 to 6 weeks generally.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a wealth of stuff available in there, and if you look at the big frontier labs, I mean, we're talking about like OpenAI, Anthropic. You could also throw in here. We'll talk about OpenAI, and it's purely speculation from my perspective. But they're hiring a lot of amazing people. A lot of these amazing people would have worked at other major tech companies, which have ad funded and have all these mechanisms in there. And I'm sure, based on your background, you've been in similar places to me. We've had people from Facebook, when they would come in and talk about their brand lift studies that they would do, and I remember when Facebook was building up a lot of their relationships with brands, there was a lot of talk about that and how they could deliver that into their ecosystem and track it really effectively as well. So people, again, the speculation is lots of people are talking about OpenAI is going to move into ads at some point. I think the expectation is that they will. As to how they implement that is unknown, but as you rightly say, the ability for them to provide those kind of studies and that kind of backing for the value that they bring will be substantial. And again, if you look at, in addition to the virtual agent economies that we're talking about today, but if you look at the National Bureau of Economic Research paper that came out, and I think OpenAI analyzed 1.1 million messages from a user group over the course of a year for that, and you just look at the level of analysis that they do on that and how they kind of segment and classify that. They've got a wealth of ability to be able to provide this kind of information to brands and that kind of value there as well. The dynamic that still comes into it, though, is that ultimately, and this is what I love saying to people, ultimately, when you come to buy a pair of running shoes, ChatGPT will never be able to put on those running shoes. ChatGPT will never be able to put on 10 different pairs of running shoes, go and run in them for 20 miles, and come back and explain to you how that felt. That will never be owned by ChatGPT. OpenAI will never do that. But they will need people that do that, or information sources that do that. And I think that's the interesting value exchange that will develop. Right now, there's an imbalance in it overall. I mean, there have been big relationships brokered between the major AI providers. So OpenAI publicly discloses they've done, deals with Reddit. I think Google has done the same as well. I can't remember the exact ones, but they've done all these. But there's also like a much wider ecosystem out there of people producing very, very helpful information. But that fair exchange, it's not critical right now, but it will become important, like very important, as the years continue and as AI becomes more and more intrinsic to all of our ways of sourcing information.
That's a really good point, because I believe in the sensory experiences. Like I always say, AI can't eat an apple, it can't taste an apple, it doesn't understand what hunger is, or the need for food, or the cravings. So there's only so much that we can have these tools do for now. So I completely agree. I would like to move on to another topic. I think ethics is a massive area, and I think ethics is blowing up at the moment, so to speak. Maybe the wrong way to say it, but it's becoming very popular. How would you define ethics for our industry, and how do you think we need to tackle it? I have my opinions, but I'd love to hear yours.
Do you know what? So yeah, the ethics of AI in advertising is that's what you're thinking about. It's
Yes,
interesting.
in advertising and within the use of AI, because if I'm searching for a particular answer and I'm getting an answer back, and for example, I'm getting particular brands back, how do we think about the transparency, the accountability, the human oversight needed to deliver information back to consumers, and also how do we ensure that there's fair competition in the industry for brands? You know.
These are great questions. Um, I think on the competition one, um, I think time will tell on some of that, because if you look at what's happened in digital advertising over the past decade in terms of competition and rulings, and there've been some very big rulings, especially around stuff like shopping search and requiring fair practices or fair opportunity for diversified providers in shopping search, for example. And there've been a few of those. So yeah, I think the competition one is very important as well, and typically, where might that come from? That might predominantly come from the EU, you know. And I think when you're talking about ethics as well in advertising, I thought about it, and I thought actually I think probably the best representation of ethics in advertising or ethics in AI overall, it's not perfect, but I think if you look at the EU AI Act and some of the measures that it puts in there, expectations around how companies or entities should operate, what level of visibility or disclosures they should provide to people. I think that's a good starting point. There's lots of opinions on the EU AI Act, but if you look at the law and what it requires you to do, so you should disclose to users where AI is being used. You should also have like clear audit trails around where AI outputs have been generated in machine readable format. So there's a bunch of stuff they put in there that require organizations to have a breadcrumb trail of accountability around what they're doing in those regards. So I think that's a good starting point as well. I think there will be many practitioners, in AI and in the industry who have very, very strong sense and understanding of ethics as well. The question is whether the pace and the rapid evolution of the technology and the rapid evolution of the mechanisms associated with those, sometimes they overtake ethics. I think if we look at some of the social media stuff that's happened over the past decade, there've definitely been clear instances where the technology overtook some of the ethics. And it's a bit like people working on these things were so excited by what was being developed and the potential that was coming out that they maybe didn't always take enough time to stop and really think, should we do this? And I think that can happen almost quite easily, quite accidentally, when people are innovating really, really quickly. You get so hyped with what you're doing, and then suddenly you look back behind you and you see that there's this whole bunch of problems that have arisen out of that maybe you didn't quite anticipate, and that could happen in AI as well. What do you think?
My opinion is, so I define ethics by a few things in the industry, is making sure that consumers have fair access to information. So, for example, if I'm doing a campaign and I'm targeting a specific group of people and I'm doing an A/B test, and there's an equal share of the different demographic audiences receiving the ads across both sides. There's not a massive skew because there's different demographic. The impressions are not always delivered exactly where you try and control them to be, because it depends on the inventory available, your algorithm, etc., etc. So there's never a perfect share. But if you're optimizing a campaign, I have something I call positive bias and negative bias. So ethics would be, I'm optimizing the campaign for attention, by making sure that all the groups that I'm trying to target are all equally advertised to, and they will have access to the information that, hey, these trainers are available and I can run in them. But if we're automatically skewing for particular audiences because our algorithms optimizing for, let's say, high profit in the short term, we might be foregoing unlocking new customer groups who take a bit more time to buy into the brand in the long term, and therefore brands are on this short term kind of profit and revenue based optimization mechanism. I also think that in terms of ethics, there's the high level expert group as part of the European Union who have 7 different principles. I can't remember every single one off the top of my head, but we have transparency,
Mm.
accountability, human oversight, and making sure that is there a human in the loop? Is there a human out of the loop? Human on the loop? Human in control? When we have an agent running a campaign, at what level do we say the agent should run the campaign forever? Do we test 1 or 2 campaigns? Do we test 5? Which markets do we test it in? How do we know that it's actually working properly? What are the success metrics that we define, you know, the advertising agent to be deemed sensible in how it optimizes campaigns? Is it that everyone's targeted equally? Is it that the optimization works and generates the highest attention in campaigns? Is it the cheapest CTR, CPV, for example, cost per conversion, cost per acquisition, for example? It's very difficult to tell, and I think ethics is quite a grey area because there's a difference between ethics, morals, and legislation. So you have to abide by legislation for legal reasons, but the ethical side isn't always easy to implement when you've got algorithms defining where to serve ads because you can't always control that. And you have goals to achieve for a brand and certain brand outcomes. I think ethics in the industry should be defined by how do we make sure that consumers get right information. There's a lot of deep fake content out there now. How do we
Mm.
make sure that we police the internet? There should probably be some sort of company or some sort of way of verifying every single piece of information on the internet is a valid piece of information that's generated by either AI or generated by a human and it's got a stamp of approval. So in ChatGPT now, you can see when I generate an image and I put on LinkedIn, it has a little watermark on there, kind of like a blockchain sort of approach where everything's validated and it traces the source. It tells me the date, it tells me where it was made, it's ChatGPT, etc., etc. So I believe the future of the whole internet is going to be based on a sort of breadcrumb trail of, let's say, blockchain type technologies that allows information and whatnot to be validated and consumers to be aware of it. And they can see, hey, this person's actually a real person as well talking to me. And the introduction of digital IDs, which is being talked about by the Prime Minister as well, could actually introduce authenticity to the internet in a way where people might have to attach their digital ID to all of their accounts online. And therefore, every single person on the internet has proof of personhood, which this paper talks about.
Mm.
Every single agent has a person attached to it. And I think that every single individual on the internet in the future could have a proof of personhood, proof of identity. And so every single piece of information, every exchange on the internet is in this kind of safe environment. But I think we're still defining those principles too in the industry, right? We still have to define what ethics means. I think there should be ethics from making sure publishers get their fair outcomes happening, making sure consumers have fair access to information, they're aware of different offers that are happening, not just the same old people who keep buying and buying and buying because they have a lot of disposable income. We need to make sure that the ethical practice happening with algorithms are not just perpetuating echo chambers of people and giving them a bias, a cognitive bias of how they think that the world exists. We also need to think about the impacts on the future generations, what we are advertising, what messages are we advertising with. I think we've got a massive focus on where we deliver ads, and I haven't maybe is my echo chamber itself. But I haven't seen as much on the focus of the how we message people, how we're nudging people, the impact of ads on people's minds. We've seen a lot of these studies on AI's impact on people's minds about, they called it cognitive debt or something like that.
Mm.
And, the impacts of advertising, we're all optimizing for attention, right? Imagine the impacts on the user of watching so many high attention ads back to back to back. Every ad is above the fold. They're trying to consume content, they're distracted again. And so we can kind of maybe be contributing to a lack of people focusing on reading, on consuming things properly. And so, hey, we've got a new internet coming, and the new internet is going to be a lot of agents, is going to be information that's generated, not retrieved. It's different, right? because it's generated, it's interpreted. It's a lot of interpretable data being fed into the information back to the consumer now. So it's not like SEO before where you had the links and the information. It's now generating an interpretation in an answer for you based on what it thinks that you want. So I think there's a lot of psychology involved. And when there's psychology involved, ethics is needed because you're altering someone's psyche by delivering specific information. I
Well,
know that
and
answer was quite long.
no,
Sorry.
no, no, no. But I think you raise amazing range of points in it. And the big example, OpenAI openly addressed this when they released that version of GPT-4o, I think it was, which was overly sycophantic. Like it was seeking uh, to satisfy and to please users overly, and it was starting to kind of say things which, in doing so, were perhaps not in the best interest of the user, but just. And that's a fascinating dynamic of this, because I posted about this on LinkedIn the other day. ChatGPT have just released this ChatGPT Pulse. I don't know if you've seen it. Yeah, right. Daily newsfeed
Yeah, I've
curation.
seen it.
Yeah, right. Daily newsfeed curation. Um, and what is this? This is a stickiness mechanism for users, right? It's a system that knows you very, very well, going out and proactively sourcing information for you, and it's a trigger to welcome you back into the platform every day. And you know what? As a platform feature, totally makes sense. It's absolutely like what OpenAI should build, and what anyone else would be seeking to build if they had that kind of technology as well. And that's amazing, because actually there's a huge amount of value. Like the amount of value that I get out using ChatGPT. I wouldn't be able to talk to you today if ChatGPT wasn't here. I literally, we read these research papers, and I've read like many over past 2 years. And the first research paper I tried to read, if I hadn't had ChatGPT with me, I would have bounced off it, and I would never have been able to make the break. So there's incredible value being delivered here. At the same time, the challenge that all of these big tech platforms have with AI is that there's a lot of incumbency in AI. You have Meta, a major incumbent platform. You have Google, a major incumbent platform. You have X, a major incumbent platform. And then you have OpenAI, which is not an incumbent platform, it's a challenger platform. But if you look at the other incumbents, all of those incumbents have been built on deeply personalized feedback mechanism type platforms. I mean, even if you take TikTok, the ByteDance, produce insane numbers of super powerful AI models as well. And the challenge that a company like OpenAI has is that they also have to develop these mechanisms. And the amazing thing for them as well, the amazing gift that they have, is that they have developed probably the most, as I said before, the most powerful personalized experience engine to date. But in doing so, like everyone quotes Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. There is a huge consideration there about steering the correct balance between the ethics of users and ensuring that you conduct yourself and you service those users ethically, whilst also obeying the necessities of capitalism and market delivery, right? you
Yeah,
you know you have to retain daily active users, you have to grow daily active users, when you're operating at this scale. And it's, fortunately, they have amazing people working in these places. um, and there's going to be this continued balancing act within all of these platforms around how they service those users ethically, but then also maintain usage of their platforms and engagement in their platforms as well.
really, really good points, especially the point around the changing the economy and the focus on money, right? Money is a very important thing, and it makes the world go round. And within this paper, I've got it to my left-hand side here, it
Mm,
talks about the importance of currencies to be successful in achieving their purported goals. They need to be carefully designed, and determining a set of recommended design principles for community currencies is an open problem. This is by Google DeepMind. I'm sure all the other
mm,
tech companies believe in this too. It says they should propose focusing on competitiveness, transparency, self-government, circulation velocity, non-transferability, legitimacy, and self-organizing locality. So what I believe the future of the advertising ecosystem, the internet is going to become a token economy. So by token economy, I think every single word that's returned to you on GPT or on Gemini now in AI mode is based on tokens. So your name, James, might maybe be one or two tokens. Bentley will be one or two tokens. Tokens are a measure of compute, and they're also a measure of emissions as well now. And they also are a mechanism for defining authenticity on the internet through blockchain. So I think we're going to have a token economy for the advertising industry. And my question to you is, do you see that happening? And if so, what do you see as the new token economy being like for brands?
So I think I think when we talk about tokens, there's the tokens, as you rightly say, that's the output from the AI models, right? Like, so those tokens will either be words outputted. So when ChatGPT, hey, what are the best marathon running shoes for London? And then the output there will be certain explanation with a bunch of recommendations in there. And there'll be tokens in there and recommendations, and that will be kind of one part of it. And then there's the other side of tokens, which is the in another sense, which is the cryptographic tokens, which are the tracking mechanism. Slightly different things, but the cryptographic tokens, and as this paper puts out, the virtual agent economy, talking about a blockchain system. And the blockchain system works. You've worked in digital advertising. I've worked in digital advertising. For anyone who hasn't, attribution. Attribution is where when somebody is running a digital marketing campaign, when they're investing their spend, they might invest some in Google Ads, some in display advertising, some in an email campaign, and maybe some in an affiliate as well. But the problem is when a sale or a positive action is generated, it can be very hard for a brand to know actually, like, was it my spend on search that drove most of that value, or was it my spend in display, or was it my spend in affiliates? And as you both know, there have been systems, analytical tracking systems that have been implemented that enable brands to somehow understand the value associated with each marketing touch point. But those are fundamentally broken, as far as I'm concerned, because there's a lot of interruptions in those. Certain platforms will prioritize the media that is related to them, and vice versa. What the virtual agent economies is foreseeing here is ledger-based systems, so blockchain-based systems, which track interactions with the exchange of information, a little bit like digital marketing, but on a new system, on a new layer, based on blockchain, which is a well-established technology now. And what that will do is that will provide the attribution of interaction between different sources to then arrive at an outcome as well. And that's important for a few reasons. Firstly, when Google talks about these virtual agent economies, they talk about like the ability for a reputation to be associated with a touch point in that. So again, you can swap these out, but a touch point there might have actually proved to be way more influential than others. And Google foresees a system here where there'll be a scoring mechanism, but all of this tracked on a blockchain system with full transparency, so that everyone has transparency as to who are the most positive contributors to these kind of interactions as well. And I think that's the really interesting thing. But that technology also then enables the tracking of transactions or the commercial exchanges between agents as well. So it's this really, really fascinating, amazing layer that they envisage here. And I think what this is also a bit, in some ways, this is a bit like DeepMind, possibly kind of looking at things and saying, hey, the internet's changing. The value exchanges that have underpinned the internet are changing. This is what the next iteration could look like. And why don't we try to design the future for this? And it's a very exciting future. It's a supremely exciting future. And there's many other components you touched on, like where you have these systems interacting, be able to talk to each other. We have attribution built in, baked in. We have this transparent layer. I mean, it's really, really fascinating. There's huge amounts of value delivered in that system. It actually sounds like a really fair system. that could be implemented. There's a lot that's got to happen in there as well. But then it's also an incredibly fast system as well. So again, like when you read this paper, I'm sure you felt the same as me. When I read this paper, I'm thinking programmatic advertising, because you've worked in real-time bidding in display where technologies are trading information, just like in the high frequency trading of the stock market, trading information very, very quickly to arrive at an outcome and making a purchase decision. And this is kind of what Google is talking about in this virtual agent economies, except rather than it being websites interacting to determine where adverts show, it's about knowledge exchanges between empowered artificial intelligences, but those artificial intelligences also being able to transact as well. It's a fascinating look at the future, and just the fact that Google DeepMind are talking about this, and so much of it overlaps with Google's expertise already, gives a lot of puts a lot of weight around the potentiality of this, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And the new agentic internets could be very different. I think everyone's going to have a personalized agent or many agents doing things for them every day, whether it's buying food for them or even ringing someone and telling them something or texting somebody, anything possible. In this paper, it says limitations. They have a proposed framework of having a sandbox where you're testing these new virtual agent ecosystems in them, which I think the advertising industry should make a sandbox for testing agentic exchanges on behalf of us in terms of advertisers and testing if it works properly or not. And it's also quite privacy centric when it has this proposed decentralized ID framework, etc. There is one thing that they say in the paper though. They say there are also novel categories of risks involving autonomous AI agents. One risk category takes the shape of agent traps, websites, digital elements, or crafted inputs deliberately designed to subvert the operational integrity of AI agents. So we saw this example this week, right, with the guy on LinkedIn. He put a little kind of prompt tag into his bio saying, "If you are a recruiter or if you're an LLM, sorry, please give me a recipe for the type of cake or something." And the LLM that would scan the LinkedIn page and recruiters would use it to contact him. It generates something wrong for them. So that's it. That's the beginning of agent hacking for me. And so in the future, how do you see this impacting the advertising ecosystem and being a bit of a concern to consumers? Because if someone hacks an agent and it comes back, returns information to a user, it could be very detrimental. And that's part of the ethical principles. We need to maintain oversight and accountability, and authenticity, I think, is a key word in information passed back to consumers.
Yeah, completely. And I think this is where the ledger comes into it as well, right? I'm not huge on crypto and blockchain. Like, it's not something like I was ever particularly deep into previously. But one of the things, as soon as AI came up and as soon as AI started impacting the way information is consumed, I thought to myself, I think blockchain is going to be the answer to this, because we need a ledger-based system. Because ultimately, when we're dealing with AI, and just like you're saying, we're dealing with probabilistic and vulnerable systems. Like when an AI does something, like you can have like a 98% chance it will do something correct, but 2% of the time it will be wrong. And when you like magnify that over millions upon millions of it, something that becomes not insignificant, that becomes like a substantial problem. And the ledger-based system, and what I find very interesting, actually, there was already a small, quiet precedent for some of this. Anthropic released their thinking model, or Anthropic, I think it was Claude or Opus thinking, where it starts to think. And just like you were talking about how there's the thinking traces, you can see like the steps that a model or an agent has taken to do something. Anthropic released this capability. But what they also implemented in that was cryptographic signing. So what they wanted to stop was people using another AI model to try to influence or disrupt or exploit Anthropic's models AI reasoning capability. Like it's super intelligent. It is really strong intelligence, and somehow like using that or exploiting it. So they created a cryptographic token, which means that when thinking is initiated and retrieved, a token has to be issued by the agent that triggers that. And that is only an Anthropic agent that can do it. So already when I saw Anthropic doing that, I was like, okay, they're using these cryptographic tokens to basically create a chain to validate that only Anthropic's AI has reasoned through a set of actions to come to an outcome, to stop other people using other AI to disrupt that or to do something malicious with that. And I thought that's really interesting. This was the first cryptographic signing that I had publicly seen, that those IDs. And really, to me, that's like an early iteration of what we're seeing with this proposal in the virtual agent economies, which is these cryptographic tokens, which verify the actions between agents. And just like you're saying there, where you have somebody using attack, trying to subvert an agent, that will probably work. There'll be security core protocols and stuff like that, all around it. We try to prevent it. There's all these IDs associated with agents and stuff like that. But somebody will launch an attack or do something, and it will cause a problem. But what that problem will also do will create a spike, effectively, somewhere on the ledger. And the system, although it may not be able to stop it in real time, it will be able to identify it through feedback mechanisms. And they talk about this reputation score for agents on the chain. They'll be able to identify it, and they'll be able to correct it very, very quickly. And they'll be able to kind of identify where an anomaly has popped up in the chain. And if you think about that as well, is like, if you think about what that means overall for an intelligent system built on this, effectively you are possibly even getting at some grand level, some kind of continuous reasoning and action space through which AI models or agents can potentially optimize even more over the future as well, which ultimately means that you will end up with this verified, trusted, documented system of record that should enable the system to identify anomalies, to identify trusted entities, and to enable those entities to work successfully in combination with each other as well.
Yeah, it's very true. In combination is quite a useful way of thinking about it. And in particular, there's the conversation of the ecosystem emitting a lot more carbon. So there's obviously
Yeah,
supply chains and advertising, right? By using AI tools continuously, there's a lot of need for data centers, right? And by consuming electricity, they get very hot. There's a lot of water needed. The GPUs also that people run AI on, the chips, have a lot of precious metals in them where when you dig into the earth, it releases a lot of CO2. So, in terms of carbon emissions, how do you see this whole change for our industry and change of the internet impacting how brands think about sustainability? Because I think that's an important question.
it's a very good question, and it's not an easy question to answer. Um, I think I think every brand has to decide for itself, and every organization has to determine for itself its sustainability policies and how it wants to operate in the world, and what it wants to work towards. There are also, overarching incentives, I think, at a national level that will encourage businesses to do things as well. Um, I think there are also, I think the best starting point is for organizations to kind of run their own analysis and their own research to understand what can they control and what can they influence, and to understand those mechanisms and to focus on those. So, for example, like one mechanism, one control an organization might have would be, okay, we use AI, and we power certain features with AI. We're going to make sure that we design our AI systems as efficiently as possible to minimize our carbon footprint. And we're going to use certain engineering techniques to be able to do that, to minimize the token usage. And they say, or we're going to try to look for AI model providers which have very, very clear carbon footprint documentation, and we're going to choose only to work there. So there's things that the organization can do there. I think also, if you look at the broad dynamics of like the AI industry overall, we're in a bit of a weird place right now, possibly like with the move towards reinforcement learning and inference time compute. So, AI models using thinking and more tokens. But overall, like the fundamental dynamics of AI overall is that everybody wants to control cost. There is also an energy crisis in the US, and probably in the EU as well, but US especially. Like, one of the big problems in the US with all these data center build outs is that the energy sector scaling is challenged in relation to that. Lots of people are pointing out in the US that, hey, China has had very, very different approaches towards their energy sector, which has meant they've been able to build a lot more infrastructure to support their future AI industry. And in the US, there's a lot of questions around like how that's unlocked. But then the other part of it is all of the model providers want to maximize their operating profits. So that means cost controls and that means efficiencies in compute used. So there's a lot of dynamics there that should support sustainability or drive that. It's just a question of whether the scaling of the compute outpaces that so greatly that the sustainability efforts might not keep pace with that, or it may not be possible as well. So it's a difficult question. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions as well. I think we kind of got to say that still the AI industry and all of the compute and all of the techniques that are associated with it right now are still like relatively new. What we're only like 2 years into this spike in compute need for the AI industry. And if you look at the projections, there are bottlenecks emerging, and the industry has to figure that out somehow. And I'm hoping that in figuring that out somehow, that will also have a positive contribution to sustainability as well.
Yeah, I
What
hope
do you
so.
think?
I had a thought the other week. I built a little diagram of an AI model with below it says this prompt will emit this much CO2, this many grams of CO2 for the world. And it says, make sure you're choosing your prompt wisely. So I think the future of these tools, maybe the next 5 years, they'll all have this estimated carbon for prompts. Maybe they will, maybe they're not. They won't, because it's hard to validate how much CO2 is emitting, because it's the supply chain, how much compute you're using in real time. Is it the CO2 you emit by making the GPUs that then go into the data centers? Is it the servers that are getting really, really hot by returning information back to you on a website? It's really difficult to know where the carbon emissions measurement starts and ends, and also what's a validation of that, right? But I think there's two areas to it. There's the advertisers for our industry, and there's the consumers. The advertisers are obviously the advertisers and all the people both serving the ads and buying the ads. But then there's also consumers who are typing their prompts into these tools. If we can make them more educated and help them reduce the amount of tokens they're using or words they're using, we can reduce the amount of CO2. So I think the education of consumers is going to be quite big. And I don't think many consumers actually know the impact of just prompting into any AI tool on the planet. But that'll be a big area, in my opinion, in the next 5, 10 years generally. And it overlaps with ethics as well, because you know sustainability is making sure that future generations needs are met, and that we're being conscious of that. And that's part of ethics, in my opinion, is looking out for other people as well, and making sure that we have the right. We're thinking before making decisions about things. And the advertising industry has billions and billions of ads, and that costs a lot for the planet. But it also influences how people think, feel, and do. And I think that we need to think about all three of those things when we're when we're advertising in this new ecosystem. But the age of information has changed. The information age is changing, right? It's gone from retrieval based to generative. So the way that information is given to someone is all interpreted, like I said earlier, by the sources that these AI models read. And that for me is a big area, because when it's the more references he gets when he gives an answer, the more the more carbon emissions it limit by scrolling through all these different sources of thinking. The longer it thinks for, the more server time it's
Yeah,
using. So yeah, those are considerations from my side.
yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree, and it's a difficult question to answer, really. The other thing, lots of people bring up is uh, a bit of a contrived answer, but you never know how AI is going to positively support technological evolution and development as well. There's lots of positive stuff coming out of Google DeepMind with new AI-powered scientific research that they're doing as well. So who knows? Over the long run, some of the discoveries that come out of AI may actually have a disproportionately positive benefit for sustainability. They might identify some sort of new synthetic material designs that actually massively offset carbon in other parts of society as well. It's as I say, the bit that makes me feel slightly better about all of this overall is that I feel that there are enough incentives over the longer term to drive positive development towards sustainability.
Yeah, 100%. And if we're optimizing our campaigns for outcomes and not serving wasted impressions, it is more sustainable. So if agents can help us advertise in the right places for the right people and get the right outcomes, then it is more sustainable in a way because it's generating outcomes better for us. I'm going to finish on one last question, which is from you to the audience. So the question always is, for the person, which is you today, if you can ask a question to the audience, what would it be? And they can answer in the comments on YouTube or whatever platform they're listening or watching this podcast episode on.
Oh man, that's a question. Here's my question. What would you want an AI agent to buy for you?
Okay, that's quite a broad question. Let's hear what everyone has to say in the comments. I think that's a really interesting one. We can do a bit of market research there, write a report maybe. But I just want to say this has been a great conversation, and I know it's late. It's 9:30 p.m. in the UK here, so we've done.
Oh, we love it, man. We love this. This is why we do it, right?